Hello there, and welcome to London Visited for Halloween. In this episode, we will bring you some scary stories from around London of ghosts and ghouls and everything you want in preparation for Halloween this year. So, sit back with a nice cup of tea and coffee, but whatever you do, be careful, because we don't want you spilling it on yourself as we scare the wits out of you with London for Halloween 2024. Sit back and enjoy our stories. For many people, the Greenwich Foot Tunnel is a long cylindrical walkway stretching underneath London's ground. Cold, damp and dimly lit, the tunnel is lined with thousands of cracked glazed white tiles. Walking through the tunnel gives one the feeling of being watched, and dripping water from the ceiling, paired with echoes from others passing through, give that feeling of uneasiness that makes you want to look over your shoulder. The most prevalent ghost story related to the haunted Greenwich Foot Tunnel in London is that of a ghostly couple. Many who have passed underneath the Thames in the Greenwich Foot Tunnel have reported to sight a pair of apparitions dressed in Victorian-era garb. Both a male and female are usually seen in the tunnel, typically holding hands and strolling along, before disappearing into thin air. No one is really sure who the couple is or what their backstory involves, leaving their ghostly appearance a mystery. Some say they were young lovers who drowned crossing the river before the tunnel was finished. They now wander the passage, happy for a safe way across. Apparently he is the ghost of George Roberts, a previous landlord who was murdered with an axe in the early 1900s. In addition to these reported ghost sightings inside the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, many others have claimed to experience other forms of paranormal activity. It's common for people to hear disembodied voices, footsteps, and feel sudden unexplicable temperature drops while passing through the tunnel alone. The Greenwich Foot Tunnel is easily accessible. It lies along the River Thames in East London, is always open, free to access, and takes around 10 to 15 minutes to walk through. Or alternatively, if you find it scary, it will take you 5 minutes at a fast run from one side to the other, whilst looking over your shoulder. Make sure you don't fall. Our next story goes to Handel's house in Mayfair, which was opened as a museum in 2001. The ghost of a woman was repeatedly encountered. The air would thicken, and a startling tall woman would appear before terrified staff. In the end, managers called in the exorcists after fears that the ghoul would affect the business. Jimi Hendrix reportedly saw this ghost when he lived next door in the late 1960s. In the London house where George Frederick Handel lived, it is host to an exorcism after two people said they saw a ghost while preparing the premises for public opening as a museum. The Handel House Trust has contacted a Roman Catholic priest who carried out the ritual in a bedroom where the composer died in 1759. The Trust does not want visitors frightened off or any damage caused. They weren't sure whether having a ghost would attract or deter customers, but with all of the valuable objects they have coming into the house, they felt it might be safer to get rid of it, said Martin Egglestone, a trust fundraiser who reported seeing the ghost twice in the bedroom of the house at 25 Brook Street, central London, just round the corner from the Connaught Hotel. His first sighting came a month ago, and he said he was helping to measure up for some curtains. Suddenly, the air got very thick and I saw a shape, higher than me, like an imprint on the back of your retina when you close your eyes, having been looking at the sun for too long. The shape seemed to be that of a woman. Another staff member also witnessed it on a second occasion, said Mr. Eggleston. There was no malevolent feeling. It felt like the pressure you get when you brush past someone in the tube and they are too close to you. Staff working in the house report a strong, lingering smell of perfume in the bedroom. Jacqueline Riding, the museum project director, said, "It's become something of a standing joke." Handel never married. His main companion was a manservant. The house was later occupied by dentists, art dealers, and antiquarian booksellers. The late rock guitarist Jimi Hendrix once said that he thought he saw a ghost in the house next door, where he lived in the late 1960s. The only women to have visited the house while Handel lived there were his two fiery sopranos, who vied to perform in his operas. "There is a possibility that the ghost might be one of them," said Mr. Ecclestone, "but they would probably have sung in the room in which he had his harpsichord on the floor below the bedroom." A local priest who wished to remain anonymous said that water would be sprinkled and a prayer would be read out to try to send the ghost away. "This is a soul who is restless and not at home," he said. "I don't see it as evil or horrible, and one should help it to be at peace." Handel lived at the house for 36 years and composed the Messiah there. It's got to be said that the publicity has probably got to help the opening of the museum. In London, you can barely move without crossing the path of some of the ghosts of Henry VIII's wives. In Hampton Court, you can find the Haunted Gallery, named for the ghost of Catherine Howard, who is sometimes seen floating down the gallery. Before disappearing through a door, she turns back and screams. Another one of Henry VIII's wives, Jane Seymour, is sometimes seen walking through the courtyard of Clock Court, holding a lit torch. There are different cases, and let's have a look at each of those in turn. At Hampton Court. Residents of Hampton Court, the Ponsonby family, Princess Frederica of Hanover, and her guards and servants, in the 1830s in the first-floor rooms were home to the Ponsonby family. They complained that they were disturbed by the sounds of a spinning wheel and a woman's voice. It is reported investigations found a sealed chamber behind a wall containing an old spinning wheel. At the same time, a guard saw a woman in a grey hooded robe leave these apartments, then vanish. Princess Frederica of Hanover described a tall, gaunt figure, dressed in a long grey robe, with a hood on her head and her lanky hands outstretched before her. The possible explanation is that the rooms above are said to have been home to Sybil Penn, Edward VI's nurse. She died of smallpox in 1568 and was buried in St Mary's Church, Hampton. In 1829, her grave was robbed. Not long after, the Ponsonby family moved in. In our second case, several people over the years, particularly in Victorian and Edwardian times, saw a ghostly lady in a long white gown and has been seen carrying a lighted taper down the stairs and go out into Clock Court. It is believed it is Jane Seymour, Henry VIII's third wife, who lived in the apartments above the archway. She died here after giving birth to their son Edward. Could this figure in white be Jane? She was buried at Windsor Castle, but her heart and other organs were buried somewhere underneath the high altar at the Chapel Royal, here at Hampton Court Palace. Caught on CCTV in October 2003, a new exhibition opened in the rooms behind the colonnade. Shortly after opening, security staff went to investigate when the fire door alarm was triggered. They found the fire doors open, but nobody there. The security staff checked the CCTV footage and saw the doors flying open, but no one was seen. The next day, the alarm went off again, but this time they found the doors closed. The CCTV showed the door opening, then being slammed shut by a mysterious and grainy-robed figure just before the security staff had got there. There is currently no explanation for the mysterious robed figure, but these rooms had not been used for many years prior to this exhibition opening. Was someone disturbed? In King William III's apartments, seen by palace staff during the 1990s event, a ghostly dog has been seen and heard here several times in the past. Queen Victoria banned dogs from the palace, although exceptions were made for lapdogs belonging to grace and favour residents. The definition of a lapdog was open to interpretation, and many were in fact rather large. A possible explanation could be that this could be the ghost of a much-loved pet. But don't tell Queen Victoria. Our next case happened in the ground floor rooms opposite the astronomical clock seen by palace staff and visitors during events during the 1980s and 1990s. when several visitors appeared to step over something in this area. When questioned by staff, the visitors claimed to be stepping over a white cat, but there were no cats to be seen. The possibility is that it was chased away by the phantom dog. Our next case is seen by Grayson Favour residents Mrs. Cavendish Boyle and Lady Eastlake. Staff and visitors have reported seeing a woman dressed in white with long flowing hair drifting down a gallery. One eyewitness said, just as she reaches the royal pew, she lets out an unearthly shriek and hurries back towards the top of the stairs with a ghostly look of despair. At other times, a ghostly hand wearing an elaborate ring has appeared from behind the curtains. Visitors report suddenly feeling very cold, and some have even fainted in the gallery. A possible explanation is that some believe this is the ghost of Catherine Howard, Henry VIII's fifth wife. Legend has it that on the night that she was arrested for treason, she ran down the gallery while Henry was in the Chapel Royal, begging the king to spare her life. However, she was executed at the Tower of London on the 13th of February, 1542. Our final case, at Hampton Court, involves Lady Hilliard, who complained that her rooms were frequently visited by two invisible beings and that she was often disturbed by the sound of knocking. When workmen were brought in to lay new drains, they discovered the skeletons of two men buried under the pavement of the cloister. The possible explanation, Lady Hilliard and many others believed that the two men were Cavaliers, executed during the Civil War and buried secretly here by the Roundheads. In fact, the skeletons were of workmen killed when William III's new apartments collapsed in 1689. So the question is, are there really ghosts at Hampton Court Palace? Some believe so. Others believe there may be scientific explanations for the sightings and sounds. From the Georgian period, people have served the monarchy or country in some way and were given homes in parts of the palace as thanks. Sometimes they didn't like the apartments they were given and wanted to swap. A good reason for swapping to get a better apartment was to claim hauntings or ghostly sightings. Or did these in fact happen? Our final look at royal ghosts is the ghost of Anne Boleyn, which has been seen on numerous occasions at the Tower of London. It is said that her ghost haunts the place of her death, beheaded within the Tower of London on the 19th of May, 1536. Perhaps the most spectacular ghost story relating to Anne is that of a captain of the guard who saw a light flickering in the locked Chapel Royal late one night. He tried to uncover the source of the light by climbing up a ladder and was met with an unbelievable scene unfolding inside. A procession of knights and ladies dressed in ancient costumes pacing the chapel. Their leader, an elegant female, whose face he could not see, but whose figure resembled that of Anne Boleyn's in portraits he had seen. The procession later disappears. In 1864, a soldier on duty near the lieutenant's lodgings made another sighting of Anne's ghost. He claimed to have confronted and challenged a white figure, and when his challenge met no response, he plunged his bayonet into the figure. To his complete shock, the weapon did not meet flesh. Instead, it went straight through the woman. According to the traditional story, an officer lodged in the Bloody Tower saw the whole event take place from his window. And finally, there are many different ghost stories relating to different tube stations in London. This one concerns Bethnal Green Station, and during the Second World War, Bethnal Green Tube Station was, like many other stations on the Underground, used as an air raid shelter. When the sirens began to moan, the residents of the poor, overpopulated East End district would make their way down the station stairs to sometimes spend whole nights shielded from the bombs falling above. The station housed an incredible 5,000 bunks and could host up to 7,000 people. On the 3rd of March 1943, however, death and calamity struck Bethnal Green, but not as a direct result of a German bomb. The sirens had sounded, and hundreds of people were pouring into the underground station, mainly the elderly, women, and children, as most younger men were away fighting. A woman carrying a baby and a bundle of bedding stumbled and fell on the crowded, blacked-out staircase. A woman and child fell over her, knocking yet more people down, and soon the stairway was a scene of people tripping and tumbling on top of each other, with some becoming trapped in a tangled heap of bodies. Panic spread, and people's frantic struggles to get off the staircase made things even worse. Nearly 300 people were thought to have fallen. 173 died from being crushed or asphyxiated, and 60 others were taken to hospital. The government, fearing news of the disaster would be bad for morale, didn't report the catastrophe for 36 hours, leading to accusations of a cover-up. When the incident was reported, it was announced the deaths had resulted from a direct hit by a bomb, and a memorial plaque wasn't put up until 50 years later. No other incident during World War II resulted in a greater loss of British civilian life. The disaster also saw the largest number of deaths caused by an incident on the London Underground. Of those who perished, only 27 were men. The rest were women and children. Unsurprisingly, this traumatic event has led many people to believe Bethnal Green Underground Station is haunted. People have reported hearing the sounds of children crying and women screaming, especially late at night. In 1981, an employee was working the night shift alone at Bethnal Green. After all the passengers had left, he locked up the station and went to an office to do some paperwork. He began to hear children crying. At first, he ignored the sound, but it got louder and louder and was soon augmented by what seemed to be women's screams and people panicking. The noise went on for 10 or 15 minutes. Deeply alarmed, the employee ventured out into the ticket hall, where he could see no one. The man said, "I was frightened to go back to the office because of the noise down there. It was quite frightening. Actually, I still don't want to go through Bethnal Green to this day. I can't forget it." I hope you've enjoyed our ghostly tales from London, be they from the depths of the underground or from the castles and royalty related. This is London Visited. Happy Halloween 2024.